Hello, everyone. Welcome to the only source for information on the Boston Red Sox farm system on the web. This is the SoxProspects.com podcast. This is episode number 126. We're recording this on Sunday, July the 16th. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor of SoxProspects.com, coming to you, as always, from the Sox Prospects Mid-Atlantic offices here in our nation's capital. And joining me, as always, is our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, hello, sir.
Hello, Chris. Great to be here on this fine Sunday afternoon where the Red Sox didn't score a run again.
Yeah, it's annoying. But hey, they do have the second best record in the AL. So there's that. But actually, I should also mention before we get too far into things that up until about a couple minutes ago, actually, she may have fallen asleep, but Firefly the cat was in the window about 2 feet from me, engaged in an epic battle with a wasp that was sitting on the window. So apologies to all of our listeners if you either hear her warbling or crashing into the blinds in an attempt to get at the wasp that is on the other side of the window. So probably should mention that up front. But back on topic, we have a bunch to talk about as usual. We've added the July 2 signees and the final draftees to sign to our rankings, so we've got to talk about that. There's one really big transaction we've all been waiting for that's highlighting our news section, and it's kind of funny if a trade goes down and people are listening to this after the trade goes down, they're going to think that's what I'm talking about. But alas, we are actually recording this before any trades have gone down. It's currently 5:37 p.m. I have Twitter open just in case, but we've got trade speculation. Are the Red Sox going to trade for Todd Frazier? What's it going to take? We'll have our thoughts on that, as well as how the Rule 5 draft could affect that trade and others. And finally, we've got your emails. Oh, and Ian has gone to see the Portland Sea Dogs, so we will get to that as well. So, Ian, let's start with some housekeeping really quick. One way that you can support the podcast is to subscribe and rate and review. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on Google Play Music, we're on YouTube. Subscribe so that you know when a new episode is up. Give us a 4 or 5 star rating, please, and a nice review to help us get in some new ears. Also, you can support us on patreon.com/SoxProspects. We appreciate everyone's support there. We recently reset our goal on Patreon as part of the Sox Prospects annual drive, and we're asking for your help in reaching that goal. Again, if you don't know how it works, you donate a small amount per episode. We've set $1, $2, and $5 per episode contribution levels, but you can honestly do whatever you want. You can see the rewards for each of those levels on the site, and yeah, that's how you can support us. We really appreciate it, and you pay that pledged amount per episode. As we do each show, we want to thank our $5 level contributors. That's Sox Signatures, Cody Pimento, Lendell Martin, Kirby Miller, Gerardo Ian Tosca, Kyle Costigan, Tyler Woodrow, Jeff Trainer, and our newest $5 level contributor, David Nardone. Correct me if I've said that wrong, David. But thank you to all of them and to all of our contributors. We have a few new contributors. We really appreciate you guys becoming patrons of the podcast and for supporting the site. I should also mention that the SoxProspects.com annual drive is going on right now. The way you can support us is to go to SoxProspects.com/donate.htm. That's donate.htm. If you go there, you'll have links to donate via PayPal and via Patreon. It has information there on how you can do that. Again, we like to keep the website free, frankly, and in order to do that, we rely on your support when you are able to contribute what you are able. There are other websites that charge for the kind of coverage that we provide. We don't do this as a day job, but doing things like traveling to games, traveling to spring training, traveling to the Fall Instructional League, keeping up hardware costs, web hosting fees, things like that. These things all cost money, so that's what we use our contributions for. Right now, we don't pocket profit at all. All the money that we get donated gets plowed right back into the website. So we really appreciate all the help that you guys have provided us through the years, and hope that those of you, even if it's $1, even if it's $2, $5, whatever you can afford, that's fine. We appreciate that. Whatever support you can provide. It doesn't have to be $1,000 gift or anything crazy like that, although, hey, if you're in the mood, we'll take it. But whatever you guys can do to support the site, we really appreciate it. So, again, SoxProspects.com/donate. You can follow the website's main Twitter at Sox Prospects. You can follow me at SP Chris Hatfield on Twitter. You can follow Ian at Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. Make sure you're checking out the news page at news.soxprospects.com. And we love getting your emails. We're going to have a few listener emails today. Make sure you're sending those into podcast at soxprospects.com. We love talking about what you want to hear about, and that's the best way to make sure we do that. One final programming note I just wanted to mention. No intro or outro music today. First off, as I've said every episode since we've started using All the Money as our intro and outro music, make sure you go support the Lodo Thieves. They're on they're on Spotify, they're on iTunes, however you get your music, Amazon, whatever. But we've made an executive decision to drop the music for now. Basically what happened is we kept getting copyright strikes on the YouTube videos since we started putting the podcast on YouTube. Even though we had permission to use the song, we had permission because I know a guy in the Lodo Thieves. I went to college with him and asked if he could use the song because I thought it was pretty sweet. He said it was fine, go for it. But unfortunately, I think it's a bot, frankly, but we kept getting copyright strikes. The copyright strike was for the wrong Lodo Thieves song. We had permission. We were giving credit to the artist and trying to support them by doing it, and we were only using a snippet of the song, which, in my opinion, is fair use. But frankly, I would go in and I would contest it, and it wouldn't be challenged. But we had one recently that I contested, and it got upheld. So I'm just done trying to deal with that, frankly. So for now, no intro or outro music going forward. Like I said, support the Lodo Thieves. They're a great band, but I'm just frankly sick of trying to go on and make sure that we can use this music when, frankly, the important thing is us. Right, Ian? Ian?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the support. That's really great right there.
I was muted. Sorry.
It's fine. At any rate, yes. So just wanted that last programming note. But Ian, let's get into the news first, as we always do now. And why bury the lead here? Obviously, the big news is the promotion of Rafael Devers to Pawtucket on July the 14th. As we had said previously, this move was preceded by Red Sox making decisions on both Johnny Peralta and Pablo Sandoval. Johnny Peralta was released. He was on a minor league deal. The organization cut him loose, so he is gone. He was released, I believe, on the 12th. And the 13th. Sorry, he was released on the 13th as the Paw Sox came out of their All-Star break. On the 14th, the Red Sox designated Pablo Sandoval for assignment. So that was another big move, which I frankly, Ian, I don't know how much we should get into that. I guess maybe just really briefly, just for people who don't quite understand what designated for assignment means. Sandoval has been removed from the 40-man roster. The Red Sox have 7 days to either put him on waivers or trade him, or I think straight release him, but I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, because he refused the assignment, so he either has to be released or traded.
He did refuse outright?
Yeah.
Okay, so I hadn't heard that he had already refused an outright assignment. So basically what that means is the Red Sox have placed Sandoval on waivers. He cleared. They attempted to outright him to Pawtucket. Sandoval refused because he has 5 years of service time, which is the difference between him and Alan Craig and Rusney Castillo, because those players did not have 5 years of service time, so they could not refuse an outright assignment. Because Sandoval has refused the outright assignment, that means that they have 7 days from when they DFA'd him. So that was the 14th. So they have until the 21st to either release or trade him. No one's going to trade for him. I've seen plenty of people trying to say trade him to a team that as in like a salary for salary deal. Like, no. Sandoval's been worth -2 wins above replacement since signing. That means he's been below replacement level, the definition of which is a guy that you can go get for like the league minimum right now. No one's trading for Pablo Sandoval, so if you've got that in your mind, get it out of your mind. But anyway, Sandoval, like I mentioned, a certain amount of time before they have to release or trade him. They'll probably just release him, would be my assumption. as in like sooner than the 21st, and he will be gone. His money will still count toward the competitive balance tax, aka the luxury tax. So there's no getting rid of that money like they did with Craig and with Castillo, unfortunately. So that's what happened there. But at any rate, Ian, Devers to Pawtucket is the big ticket item here. We mentioned it would happen pretty much as soon as those moves happened, and it did. Devers is already raking in Pawtucket. I think he went 4 for 4 with a home run in his debut. In his second game, he finally made an out. What do you project for Devers going forward? How long do we think he's in Pawtucket? How long do you think before Major League call becomes a potential item? Does it depend on what happens at the trade deadline?
I think that he'll be in Pawtucket probably for the majority of the season. There's been obviously some chatter that people like to see him up in the big leagues, but I think he's someone who could use some more seasoning. And the at-bats at AAA and then the playing every day defensively will be good for him. Obviously, he got off to a really good start last night. He went 4 for 4 with a home run, a double. And the home run came off Neil Cox, who's a 10-year Major League veteran. So that was a good sign to see when Devers can hit lefties. But I do think he still has some things to work on. I saw him recently in Portland. And, he's still a little antsy against breaking pitches. Defense can use a little refinement, though. He's still very solid over there at third base. But I think that if it was a different situation, he wouldn't get called up, or a different team. But based on just the issues with third base and something we'll talk about a little later, if they do make a move, it'll probably kind of telegraph it. Because if they don't make a move, I do think eventually they'll at least give him a try out there, kind of like they did Moncada last year.
I think if they do make a move for someone like Todd Frazier or someone of similar ilk, Jed Lowry, something like that, Martin Prado, although Prado makes no sense whatsoever to me. If they do that, then I think the writing's on the wall. Devers isn't coming up until September. I think he does come up for a September call-up. I can't imagine he doesn't come up in September. I don't know about you. I think even just to get him exposed to the clubhouse, that would be a good thing to do. But I think if they don't make a move, he's up in mid-August, as long as he's doing well in Pawtucket. If not sooner, maybe. But, I think a month in Pawtucket would be ideal.
Yeah, I agree. He needs at least a month. But, again, I think it would be best for both him and the team if they can find a solution to handle for this year, and then they can keep him down for another month next year so that they can get that extra year of control.
Right. Okay, well, yeah, so that's Devers to Pawtucket. We've been waiting for that for a while. Finally happened. Other news, final draft signings. The draft signing deadline was on July the 7th, Friday the 7th. The Red Sox signed 5 guys that day. The big one, or a couple of them, frankly. The biggest one was 4th-round pick Jake Thompson. People were starting to wonder if the team wasn't going to sign him, frankly, because it was taking so long. But he signed, and he not only signed, he signed for below slot, Ian, which kind of surprised me a little bit. And I think this is pure speculation on my part. I could see the reason it took so long maybe was just the two sides kind of feeling each other out on money, because the Red Sox were trying to get that contract as low as possible. He signed for $350,000, which is just under $48,000 less than slot for that pick, the 131st pick overall. The Red Sox took that money and used it towards a couple of their other signings, the biggest being 14th round right-handed pitcher Aaron Perry. He's a high schooler from West Virginia. They signed him for $172,500, which is $47,500 ahead above the $125K quote slot for all picks after the 11th round. So he counted towards the draft bonus cap for $47,500, if that's how you would say that. I don't know. That's a weird way to say it. The Red Sox also signed their 20th round pick outfielder David Durden for $125K. He's a high schooler out of Georgia. They signed their 29th round pick Tyler Dearden. So we've got a David Durden and a Tyler Dearden. No Tyler Durden. This is not Fight Club. But Dearden is a center, also an outfielder. He's out of New Jersey. He signed for $140K, so he signed for $15,000 above slot. And the last player to sign that day was right-handed pitcher Andrew Carber from Chipola. He signed for $5K. He, I believe, was a senior. Or no, he had. Oh no, he was Chipola's a JUCO, right? Yeah. He had no commitment apparently per our draft history page, so that was kind of interesting that it took that long to sign him. But at any rate, he signed, which is good. So that brings the total amount the Red Sox spent on the draft to $5,942,000. The Red Sox spent almost up to their cap plus 5% number. Basically, the 5% mark is relevant because you could spend up to your draft cap with no penalty. You could spend another 5% with the only penalty being a tax on whatever money you are over. Once you get over 5%, you start losing draft picks. The Red Sox were less than $10,000 away from their cap plus 5% number. They were $8,455 away. If anyone cares about the exact math, you can check it out at the draft history page on SoxProspects.com. But Ian, they did a good job, I think, restocking the lower levels of the system, which I think were pretty barren, both in terms of talent and in terms of numbers, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think the volume was the most interesting thing to me. I mean, you look at they signed out of their first 36 rounds, they signed 32 of them. They didn't sign the 15th rounder, the 23rd, 26th, and 28th. Other than that, they signed everyone. I think this is the most guys they've signed that I can remember. I don't know if you went back and looked, but in past years, like you just even go back to last year after the 27th round last year, they only signed one. Go to the 2015 draft, and it's they didn't sign anyone from they signed a couple of guys, the 31st round pick, 35th, 36th, and 37th, but there's still a lot of empty slots at the end. Versus this year, I think they made a concerted effort to make sure that they could get guys who would sign.
Right.
And the only guys that didn't were the guys who they all have big college commitments. They did a good job identifying. I mean, their scouts actually who did it went out and identified guys who, I don't know for sure, but it looks like they have some upside. And at the same time, they were signable. And, with the new draft system, you can't have drafts like that. Mookie Betts, who else was in that draft? Bradley, Barnes. You don't get drafts like that anymore. So you kind of have to. You're more reliant on your scouts being able to find guys who are willing to take reasonable amount of money.
You don't get as many picks too, is the thing too. I mean, they drafted that many guys because they had 4 first-round picks, which doesn't happen anymore.
You're right. You're right. I forgot
because the players that they got supplemental picks for in 2011 were Victor Martinez and Adrian Beltre. Actually, they probably would have both gotten QOs.
No, they would have got QOs, yeah.
Yeah. So
but anyway,
they wouldn't have been 2 picks for each, one in the first round and one in the supplemental round.
Yeah, it's only one pick now.
They would have, in theory, not had Matt Barnes and Blake Swihart and only had Henry Owens and Jackie Bradley, which, frankly, actually, in the long run, wound up being fine because Bradley alone, along with Betts in the 5th round, makes a plenty fine draft. And Travis Shaw in the 9th just to mess with people. But anyways, please, go ahead.
It seems like the guys as you said, Perry, the guys they signed late, Perry, Dearden, Durden, couple guys, high school guys who were in the top 500s of BA or perfect game. And in Perry's case, he was 261 in perfect game. Bohan is another guy who was in the top 500 of perfect game. They took a lot of guys that they gave 125K to, and that's just doing a good job scouting and knowing what it's going to take to sign guys.
They signed 1, 2, 3, 4.
32. Oh, I know you're
4 guys for $125,000, and another 1, 2 more for $100K after the 10th round. And that doesn't count Perry and Dearden, who of course got overslot.
And that's, with the new rules, you kind of need those guys because that doesn't count towards the cap. And if you look at it as a point of comparison, last year they signed 1, 2, 3, 4. They signed 4 guys for $100K or more after the 10th round last year.
And it just shows you. I think that draft was. Well, sorry, I cut you off. Finish your point.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, but that makes sense because they had to pay for Jason Groome basically.
That's what I was about to say. I should have let you finish, but yeah. By the way, that answers my question about Chipola, because that's where Groome has switched his commitment to, was Chipola Junior College.
Well, no, but there's 2 Chipolas, I think. Or there's 3.
No,
there's one in California.
It's Seminole State.
I thought there was one in California also.
Hold on. My wife from Florida is mouthing something to me. Yes, dear. Chipola is in the Panhandle. There's only one. As far as you know. Yeah. Because the Seminole State thing I remember came up because Teddy Stankiewicz went to one.
Oh, and Danny Mars went to the other.
Danny Mars went to the other one.
Oh, you're right. I was thinking of Seminole State. Chipola's only in Florida.
Yeah, Chipola's in the Panhandle. Thank you, honey.
Yeah.
Love you. Love you, sweetheart.
But yeah, and it's also they signed a lot more high school guys after the 10th round, which I like.
They did.
That's something we've kind of talked about is that I see a lot of like the low minors guys in especially once the Lowell season starts, and a lot of those rosters are stocked. What?
Instructs too.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
And those rosters are just chock full of for other teams have been chock full of the high school guys who are in their second year in the org and going to Lowell. And the past few years, the Red Sox really haven't had those guys
the New York
because
Penn
they
League,
just
been. Lowell.
Yeah, going to the Penn League.
Right.
And I mean, you look at like last year, for example, the only high school guys they signed who got over 100 or after the 10th round were Juan Carlos Abreu and Alberto Schmidt. One of them's Alberto Schmidt's from Puerto Rico, and Abreu was from Florida, I think. But
and they're both repeating the GCL, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Versus this year, they got Andre Colon, Bo Hanna, Perry, the Durdens, Angel Gonzalez.
Well, technically, Durden and Dearden have different names.
Whatever. They're going to be the same thing to me. Luis Torres, there's a bunch of guys right there that they haven't added, in past years. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty interesting class, and I'm looking forward to starting to see some of the guys.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because they got Jecorrah Arnold as an undrafted free agent who got $50K.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about him.
And
I think he's off to a pretty good start down in the GCL, from what I remember correctly.
Yeah,
he's hitting like 260, which isn't bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's. Let me bring him up right now. The GCL stats, which I haven't had too much of a chance to look at, but Arnold's hitting 263, no power yet. But I mean, it's also a super small sample size. It's four
hit by pitches in 7 games. I like that.
Oh, that. I was looking at the on base percentage and seeing one walk and wondering why.
I thought it was a typo, but that's why. Yeah.
Why he had an ISO-D of over 100 with 1 walk, but that makes more sense. Okay.
But I think that. After taking a step back and seeing what they did, which we're probably going to talk about a sec, the international guys where they're ranked, where we have them ranked, but it seems like they had a plan this year between the international signings and the draft of what they wanted to do, and it seems like they did a really good job executing it because you look at the top end of their draft and it's very pitching heavy, college pitching too. And then you go after the 10th round, and obviously they have those college arms, but that's where they're getting the high school bats. Other than Perry, all those guys we listed are high school bats. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like that strategy because those are the kind of guys you never know what's going to happen. The odds are none of them make the big leagues, but who knows? Maybe somebody under the radar takes a step forward, etc. And then internationally, of course, they went heavy on bats also. So it's kind of like there's a nice balance between the two.
Well, let's just jump right into it then. There's no point in. We'll jump back into news for that last tidbit in a minute, but let's just jump into the debuts then, Ian, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think so.
We debuted. Let's just talk about it between not just the new guys who went in on Friday, of which there were 5.
4.
5. There were 5. 3 international guys, 2 draftees.
You're right.
So there were 5. But total, you have, jumping in on the rankings. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought the cat was in the kitchen on the counter. Okay, so we had the first 6 rounds picks all are in the top 40. And then the 7th rounder and 14th rounder are also in the top 60. Internationally, you added 3 guys who are ranked. So to your top 60, you just added 11 ranked guys. It's not a bad
9.
9. Am I
9?
Do my maths suck? I know you like
6
to say
plus
maths.
3. Maths.
Maths.
Didn't you say? Oh no, you're right. 11. My maths were bad.
Oh,
I forgot the 2.
Yeah,
11. And you, excuse me. And you think about it, and the system starts to look a little better now. Guys, I kind of feel like when we were discussing the rankings, they're more where I would have liked them. Does that make sense?
You know what it is to me? 30 feels right now. 60 feels right now. 5 still doesn't feel like it's where it should be. Does that make sense?
No, but it's
getting maybe not 5. 5's wrong. 10. I think
No, I would say yeah.
I think so. Obviously, Devers is your Uber prospect at 1. Jay Groome's a fine number 2. I'm cool with Chavis at 3. Even the new 4 to 7 tier for me is because as we have it ranked is Michael Chavis at 4, Tanner Houck, the first rounder, right-handed pitcher out of Missouri, is at number 5. Number 6 is Bryan Mata, right-handed pitcher at Greenville, who frankly on August 1st, I'm probably going to try and move up. Based on how
he's
well
good at
he's
baseball.
doing. He's very good at baseball, which
is
good
not
at
just
baseball
that,
rankings.
The reports are very good too.
Sure.
I mean, we've seen him. I've seen him 3 or 4 times already. Mm-hmm. Not this year, obviously. Actually, I have seen him this year. I saw him.
Well, not in Greenville.
But
your point. Yeah.
But not in Greenville. But I've talked to people who have seen him in Greenville, and it's good feedback. I'll just say that he's someone who I expect if the Red Sox make a more significant trade, teams will be asking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as we pretty much have figured out, at least either the White Sox or the Brewers asked about him this past offseason, and the Red Sox said no. So we know that about two. We know that about 2 players, Rafael Devers and Bryan Mata. I'm not saying they're number 1 and number 2. And actually, I do kind of sort of want to correct something I said earlier about Devers with the trades last year, and if I can, is I have really been hammering on it was noted Devers is the number 3 guy in the deal. Have heard things. Right. Yeah. Have heard things that wasn't quite the case. So I will take that back. It was noted Devers, full stop.
That was not the case.
Yeah. So, I mean, no, but that's good. I mean, I was reading into what I was seeing reported, had gotten a report that no, it was actually noted Devers. So that's intriguing to me. Yeah. I still think they were wrong if it was yes to Moncada, no to Devers as like the headliner of a deal. Frankly. I say that as someone who loves Devers. You wouldn't take Moncada over Devers? Or are you saying that because they had a second baseman?
No. I mean, I am factoring that in, but I think Rafael Devers is going to hit better than Moncada will. I'm not sold that Moncada can hit. Like, I think that's okay. Let me rephrase that. I'm not sold that Moncada is going to reach his potential with his hit tool because of the amount of swing and miss in his game.
All right.
There.
Okay.
And the defensive question is still
higher ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
No, it's a question. I'm just saying, do you agree?
I think Moncada maybe has a slightly higher ceiling, but I think Devers has a much better chance of reaching his ceiling.
Interesting. Okay, I can buy that.
I'm starting to. One of the things I'm coming around on is that, like, I think that guys like Devers' level of hitter, it really does matter. And yes, Moncada has the physical tools and looks great in a uniform, but at the end of the day, if you don't make enough contact, you're not going to reach your potential. And that's the legit question with him. Versus, I have no like concerns about Devers' ability to make contact or anything like that. Right. You know, he's just a natural hitter. He's going to rake. It could take a few years, but I'm just concerned Moncada is going to end up being like a 270, 280 hitter, which isn't bad at all. I mean, that's great if he's an average hitter.
That's great.
But
with the power
exactly, has. But versus I think Devers can hit over 300 with 30 home runs a year. And with him being a better defender than Moncada is right now, I think that's a more valuable player.
All right, I can dig that. I think there's something to be said for the fact that Moncada is a switch hitter and has to work on 2 different swings.
Especially when his right-handed one is behind, and he doesn't get enough reps with that too.
That's fair. That's probably fair, but
it's close. Like I don't want to say there's a huge difference. But
you're going to fit Moncada. He can impact the game on defense. Yes, Devers can be an average to maybe above average defender at third base, but I don't think that while Moncada has a lower floor defensively than Devers has, I think the ceiling is about the same. Maybe he doesn't have the arm.
Yeah, I mean,
the tools
I don't think it's a huge difference. I don't think it's a huge difference, but do you keep hearing something popping up in my in the background?
No.
Okay, because there's an ad that's playing on our website that keeps like making a noise and saying like one phrase, and I keep hearing it like every time I'm talking, and it's really bothering me.
Refresh the
page.
But
I wasn't sure.
I'm going to leave this in. Okay, stop. I'm going to leave this in to remind everyone. If that happens to you on the website, just refresh the page, and the ad will go away.
Okay.
No,
All right.
so
Yes,
it's
that was a good discussion.
yeah. I mean, it's fair. Anyway, to get to the point I was trying to get to at number 7, which we left hanging there, is catcher Daniel Flores out of Venezuela, who the Red Sox gave $3.1 million to. Everybody, if you heard Ben Badler on the last episode of the podcast talking about him, if you didn't, hit pause, go back, listen to episode 125, then rejoin us. We'll wait.
Or finish this episode and then go back.
No, I'm waiting.
You can tell this is take 2.
Yeah. Right, we're a little punchy. I may or may not have had a gin and tonic in the meantime. But yeah, Flores, we had kind of a discussion about. I will lead with this, Ian. We historically, for both international players and draftees, but I think more so, it's fair to say, for draftees, or for international players, sorry, the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Have been very conservative in initial rankings. 2 reasons for this. One, we haven't seen the guy, we've seen the other guys. We know what the other guys are. I personally don't want to just immediately shotgun a guy into their best possible ranking based on what we think he is. Just on principle, because for a number of reasons. A, reports on these guys, on draftees and international guys, tend to be a shade inflated, I think. B, yes. It's part of a risk ceiling floor assessment, really. You know, is a guy really, you know, when you're comparing the ceiling and the floor and the projection and the chances within those error bars, so to speak, just with new guys to the system, until we can get them in person, we really have to take the widest possible possibility in the error bars. And
I think also.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to finish?
You're going to say what I was about to say. I can tell.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I also think that there's just the proximity to the big leagues and the fact that like Flores isn't going to play any game until next June probably. So you're looking at like you stick a guy up there and you're kind of beholden to it versus I'd rather have someone a little lower but still ranked pretty highly. And then gradually increase them after we get reports on them from Instructs, Extended, wherever they are. Yeah. And move it up more organically than just say like, well, this guy, yeah, he got a huge bonus and everything we've read looks pretty good. Let's stick him up there. Like I don't like that process.
And I think that the reports you get, Ben Badler, Jesse Sanchez, they do an awesome job. Everybody that covers the draft, everyone that covers the draft. Look, I have a hard enough time covering 200 guys. I can't imagine covering multiple countries, all this stuff. Draftees, ranking 500 guys, what is that? That's insane.
Ranking states, regions, everything.
Insane. I can't imagine. When you read the blurb about a guy, the one that's coming to mind right now is Michael Almanzar, who signed with the Red Sox for 7 figures. 1.4? 1.5, yeah. His father was a major leaguer who the Red Sox, I think, signed that year basically to try and get him to get his kid to sign with them.
Yeah, 1.5.
Yeah. Got to the Gulf Coast League, singled, wandered off the bag, and was tagged out because he didn't know you needed to stay on the base. You're not going to read a report on an international guy that says has such a small understanding of how the game is played that he will wander off first base. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's more likely the things you don't know are in the things one needs to learn direction than in the surprise, he's got a third pitch we didn't know about. It's just the nature of it. It's not a knock on anybody doing these things. It's just the nature of the beast. And so that's kind of why, like I said, maybe less so with draftees than with international guys.
Well, draftees are also, it's a little easier to get info from scouts on them. Getting info from scouts on international guys is almost impossible.
Right. Well, because, you're also not necessarily talking to the guys because those guys live in
exactly.
America. You're not running into the international scouts, at the Lowell game. But I think we all kind of eventually, I will admit I was pushing for Flores potentially at 4 ahead of Chavis, but I think you guys kind of convinced me, Mike especially, was kind of leading the charge to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. Mata is a 18-year-old kid that's succeeding in the South Atlantic League right now. Tanner Houck pitched in the SEC for 3 years. Chavis just broke a single-season record for the Salem Red Sox in half a season for home runs at home. It's
He's also second in the minors in home runs.
Right. And he's scuffling a little bit in Portland, but, it's fine. I have no problem with it.
I saw him.
He hits 240, 275, 440 for the rest of the season in Portland, and I'll be fine with it. I'm not going to necessarily be saying we should drop him. But yeah, I think I'm happy with where we wound up on Flores.
I agree.
Rounding out the top 10 right now is Josh Ockamy at 8, CJ Chatham at 9, Bobby Dalbec at 10. And hey, maybe this transitions us really quickly back into the last bit of news, is that Bobby Dalbec was activated from the disabled list on July the 12th. He is back in Greenville. CJ Chatham.
Homered last night.
He did homer last night. Good call. CJ Chatham is rehabbing in the Gulf Coast League after re-injuring his hamstring. Again. Yeah, well, I mean, last time
it's been a tough year for Chatham.
It's going to wind up being a lost year for Chatham, I think, and that's a fact of life. He'll probably still go to Salem next year. I can't imagine he repeats Greenville unless he just looks terrible in spring training.
I think what it might mean, though, is he probably goes to Instructs this year.
Yeah.
Whereas they might have, if he played the full year, they've given him the year off, or the
fall off. But you'll just have him come in for the conditioning camp. The strength and conditioning camp.
Yeah, you're right. That's what they would have done. I think he'll probably play. I mean, he will play, actually. I would almost guarantee.
He needs the at-bats. Yeah, he definitely will.
Exactly.
Yeah, so good to see them coming back. Easy news piece to skip because there really wasn't much to say about it other than yay. And actually, you know what? Really quick, Ian, let's get to we had an email that we've covered 2/3 of. Come to think of it. So
really?
Yeah, we got an email from Mike Renier, and he said, hello, my question for the podcast is, what is the status injury updates on these top 60 prospect list players? CJ Chatham, Kyri Washington, and Bobby Dalbec. Sincerely, Mike Renier. There's Chatham and Dalbec. As for Washington, we don't know. No information reported.
He's hurt.
Yeah, he's clearly hurt. That's another guy, I think, who's kind of a lost year for him injury-wise. Really hasn't played much. He's been on and off the disabled list, I believe, although I'd have to double-check on that. But tough year for Washington, who he just fell out of the top 60. It may be a good opportunity to make this point, Ian, which we'll come back to in a minute with another one of our emails. But keep in mind when a guy was ranked on June the 15th and is unranked on July the 15th, they didn't necessarily fall. As we just mentioned, 11 guys just entered the top 60. It's quite possible that what just happened is the Red Sox just acquired 11 guys we like better. And that pushes 11 guys off of the rankings. Maybe a little fewer if you have things like, Nick Longy getting traded. Longy was at 13. He gets traded. That kind of cancels out one of the guys who's getting pushed off the back end. But I don't think we think any less of Washington so much as he was just kind of pushed off the rankings.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for the email, Mike. We'll tell you these things if we know anything, but we don't know anything on Washington. Getting back to the rankings, so that's the top 10. As we mentioned in the next 10, I think we'll just talk about the debuts from draftees. Cole Brannen and Alex Scherff are at 14 and 15 right now. Behind Jalen Beeks, Travis Lakins, Bryan Johnson. I think we'll see a little bit of movement in that area come the August 1st rankings, but I think, again, that's kind of a good conservative starting point for those guys. Brannen, taking a lot of walks, but not really hitting for any power right now in the Gulf Coast League. But again, and we're going to say this a number of times over the next couple months, short season stats in Lowell and Gulf Coast League for guys who are debuting, I could not care less about.
Concur.
Except to the extent that, A, if a guy is destroying a league like Dalbec did last year, or B, if a guy is doing I hate to bring it back to Shaq Thompson, but if a guy has gone to the plate 50 times and struck out in 45 of them or something like that, that's also a problem on the other end. As long as that's not either of those is happening, I'm just kind of like, okay, great, you are learning how to play professional baseball. Wonderful. Have fun. We'll see you next year. You'll probably see those guys at Instructs, Ian, So
yes, I would say so.
I care a lot more about what you'll see down there than about what they do in the Gulf Coast League statistics-wise. I think those are good spots for them. They're followed by Mike Shawaryn, Mike Shawaryn. I still can't say his name. Shaun Anderson, and our first debut of a draftee who signed on the 7th in Jake Thompson, the 4th rounder from Oklahoma State. He debuts at 18 ahead of Darwinzon Hernandez and Jamie Callahan. Seems like a good spot for Thompson, Ian. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a right-handed college version of Hernandez. The more I think about it, in that it's a good fastball with command issues, in a very limited sense at the very least. Throws a little bit harder than Hernandez. He touches 98, sits mid-90s. But, righty to lefty, that's kind of makes up the difference. Good spot for him, I think. We had kind of voted on him before we did the June rankings. The July 1st rankings, and that's where he had wound up, and we decided to keep him there. It made a lot of sense, I think, for Thompson. But that's 5 top 20 players that the Red Sox have added in the past month. A few nice gets there, I think.
Yeah, I think on Thompson, it kind of seems he falls in between. I'm not sure if he's a starter or reliever yet.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously need to see him. And I think that's a good range because he's with a couple other guys that I think the same thing. Guys like Shawaryn, Anderson, Darwinzon Hernandez.
Yeah.
But just because, we don't know, but he might have a chance to start. And if you're taking him that early, you probably think he has a chance to start. He probably belongs ahead of the group of relievers that dominate the next 10 or so spots in the rankings.
Mm-hmm. And we should probably make quick mention to. Although with this mid-July ranking, we were only intending to insert new players, we did kind of use our discretion to make a few changes, and one was flipping Mike Shawaryn and Shaun Anderson. I kind of wanted to wait till August 1st, but I got it. I just think basically their numbers are eerily similar in Salem right now, except that Shawaryn's missing a lot more bats.
Yeah, I've had Shawaryn ahead of Anderson for a few months now, so that's that was something I've had for a while, but I think that Shawaryn has a better chance to miss bats, and gave him the slight edge for me. But it's very close, and that's I think reflected by the fact that they're right next to each other.
Yeah. It's I always feel weird about clustering, say the two clustering Brannen and Scherff because they're the two high school guys from the same draft that were of a certain pedigree beforehand, as opposed to. I don't know what you would have there, but keeping Shawaryn and Anderson together because they're college guys, keeping 2 international guys who signed together just because they signed for about the same amount of money. It's tough, but at the same time, sometimes that's because they belong next to each other. I don't know. It's tough. Yeah. All right, we'll go really quick through the next 40. In the 21 to 30 range, the only debut is Danny Diaz. As opposed to Denny Daza, who also signed, and as opposed to Donnie Diaz, who did not sign as a draftee. Danny Diaz was the infielder who signed for $1.6 million out of Venezuela. We debuted him number 22 after Callahan, after Roniel Raudes at 21, ahead of Ben Taylor, Ty Buttrey, Steven Nagosic, Austin Maddox. Again, it's a little bit of throwing a dart at the dartboard, but I think it feels about right ahead of the sure thing relievers. I might actually move Callahan back a little bit in the next rankings, thinking more about the reliever starter thing, but
yeah, I think it's about right. Diaz seems like from what we've understand and from what Ben talked about, he seems like kind of a bat first guy, but he's got some pedigree with the bat. He was, I think, a top 10 international prospect. So
yep.
I think that's about right, in the early 20s, where the chance to move up if he starts to impress.
Yeah. Debuts in the next 10, falling down a little bit because of the guys that went ahead of them were Brett Netzer, the 3rd rounder out of UNC Charlotte. He's a second baseman. He's in Lowell. He's hitting pretty well right now, hitting 330 at-bats. Zach Schellenger, who is at 33, hasn't pitched yet. He's a relief pitcher out of Seton Hall. He is as I mentioned, 33. He's in the Gulf Coast League. Hasn't pitched. I don't know if he's going to or not. He dealt with some injury issues and some health issues during the college season, so he may or may not debut this year. And the final debutee in the top 40 entered at number 40, and that's the shortstop, Antoni Flores, who signed for a $1.4 million bonus on July 2. The reports just aren't quite as good on him as on Diaz. So as much as we were kind of like, oh, it's the two other shortstops who signed for the same amount of money. That's why I was kind of talking about you have to resist the temptation to just clump them together because they're international guys who signed for about the same amount of money. Honestly, with the international guys, Ian, these guys could move really quickly in either direction based on what you see in instructs, based on what we see in spring training, if they're there, and based on how they do next year. So it's kind of, like I mentioned, darts at the dartboard, but, again, these guys
good hedge for now.
Yeah, I think these guys, they're all kind of hedges till we see what we can do kind of once you get into this range. Other debuts in the back 20, I think the only other one we have is... two, I guess. Tyler Esplin, who was at 59 when we did the June 1st ranking, but we actually moved him up a little bit with kind of some shuffling in the back end of the rankings that we did. He is at 56, acquitting himself fairly well in the Gulf Coast League right now as a high school draftee out of IMG Academy in Florida. Kind of a big kid, we're hearing. He's listed at 6'3", 230, so he's a large dude playing left field.
An 18-year-old.
Yeah, it's impressive. A big dude. So I'm interested to see what happens once he gets in kind of a professional. I guess he'd be doing a better than normal high school conditioning program at IMG Academy, which is literally a baseball factory. Yeah. So that'll be it. But it'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to pro ball. And the last debut is at 58, where Aaron Perry, the 14th rounder who we mentioned, got above slot. Just the reports on him, for me, and I think we all kind of agreed, warranted putting him in the top 60. Potential kind of a pop-up guy on the high school scene, on the sort of showcase scene. Sits in the low 90s, tops out at 95, or at least that's what he did at some showcases. But he missed the end of this season with a stress fracture in his right elbow, so I don't know if he's going to pitch it all this year. I'd actually be very surprised if he pitched it all this year, even though he's down in the Gulf Coast League. He's probably just rehabbing. Even if he's, quote, healthy at this point, I can't imagine they won't just kind of bring him along very slowly, maybe get him a couple innings in instructs. But overall, a nice haul for those guys. Really not a lot of debate as far as the other debuts went, I think, Ian. Do you remember any in terms of the debuts? We seem to kind of...
No. I think we were all pretty much on the same page. And I don't think anyone else was even considered.
No, we thought briefly about whether to rank... who was the like Nelfi Abreu, who was the shortstop out of the Dominican that got $450K, but I think you and I were kind of really quickly on that, just saying I don't really see it with Abreu. Hey, maybe he comes along and does something, next year in the DSL, we rank him. But,
need to see it.
Yeah, you got to see it in person. The other interesting thing we're seeing is some of the July 2 signings are immediately getting into games in the Dominican Summer League.
Really?
Yeah. Well, the DSL team they cut a few guys and added a few guys recently to the roster.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah. I think it depends on age in part.
Oh, okay.
So we'll have more on these guys once we get all the information on their signing dates and that kind of thing. And
they've added a bunch of 20-year-olds to the roster. Yeah, I wonder if you're 16 you can't, but if you're older, probably, you probably can. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of these guys. But overall, I think a nice haul for this class. Frankly, they did a good job, kind of replenishing a little bit. And like I said, to me, it's getting back to normal in some parts. I think where the lack of depth is kind of. And this could fix itself very quickly, frankly, is kind of the back end of the top 10, maybe heading in the back end of the top 20, where you're just kind of like, all right, I'd like 8 to 20 to be a couple steps better, but the system's fine right now, I think.
Yeah, it's better than it was, but again, the question mark is we're approaching the trade deadline, and there's been some rumors around that, so
let's talk about that.
What happens there.
You took the bait. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Professionals here.
Yeah, hey, it's what we do, sort of. It's what we do when Skype is working, at least. So, and Joe's so going to make that the title of the episode. Anyway, trade deadline coming up at the end of July. We are now 2 weeks away. And frankly, we were afraid when we were recording this earlier that by the time this got published, Todd Frazier would be a Red Sox. All of the speculation seems to center on the fact that the Todd Frazier deal, while not done by any stretch, while not certain, is close enough to happening that it could happen very quickly. We've seen some speculation about what it might take to acquire him, so maybe that's kind of where to go, Ian, I think, is what do you think it'll take to get a Todd Frazier type? And I'll bring up Todd Frazier's numbers right here, but generally a power-hitting third baseman, most importantly, more than capable, at least average Major League third baseman, which is something the Red Sox have not had all year. My apologies to the Surero platoon at third base that's working fairly well right now, although both guys are, if they're not already, I'm sure are going to start coming back down to earth. I'm sure some people will look at Frazier's numbers right now and see, oh my God, a 210 average. He's not a guy that's going to hit for average. He hit 225 last year, but it's a 330 on base percentage. It's a 438 slugging percentage. He's going to get on base at a fairly decent clip. The 330 on base percentage is the best one he's had since 2014. He's a two-time All-Star. He's got 16 home runs on the year. He's hit 29 or more home runs the last 3 years. He's almost certainly going to get there again this year, I would assume, based on rates. You're going to get a third baseman that can hit you 30 home runs, Ian. That's a lot better than what they've had. It takes a spot in the order that's been a hole, and it makes it, if not a strength, at least it plugs the hole. Frazier is a free agent after this season. He's making a $12 million salary this year, which the Red Sox would pay a prorated amount of. But I believe, $12 million this year. It's not. That would be his value. It's an arbitration contract, so I think it's an avoiding arbitration contract. Yeah, he's in his sixth full season. I kind of like the fit, frankly, a lot better than, say, a Martin Prado. I think if you're going to go get someone, you get someone that's a rental. It keeps the cost down. But let me just throw this to you, Ian. If you are the Red Sox, let's start here. What do the Red Sox hope that it's going to cost reasonably? What are the Red Sox hoping to get? And what are likely is going to be the price if the two teams agree on the deal? So I'll throw to you, what if you are the Red Sox, are you hoping that you're able to get Todd Frazier for?
I think it depends on how much money the White Sox are eating, but because the Red Sox are kind of close to the tax, so I think that would be a factor. But if we're assuming that the White Sox are not eating any of the salary, I don't think the Red Sox would have to give up anyone inside like the top 15 of our current
top
rankings.
15?
If the White Sox are not eating any salary, yeah. I don't think there's a huge market for Frazier. I think that the White Sox will ask for better than that. But if you're the Red Sox, I don't see, especially if you're bringing on, you're going to have to pay like $5 million plus for the rest of the season for a guy who's hitting, he's got power, but he's not hitting that well, and he's useless to the White Sox after this year because you're not going to offer him you're not giving them the QO. So,
well, I'm Rick Hahn, Dave.
Oh, if I'm
make me an offer.
I would say I would give like Mike Shawaryn or Sean Anderson, someone like that for him. I would go high.
One of them. Well, okay. So your initial offer is one of them with whom?
Lorenzo Cedrola, someone from like that. Maybe Darwinzon Hernandez, someone like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't think that Frazier's. I would give more than that. Like if you wanted, someone I know you're probably going to bring up. Like I would give up like Josh Ockamy straight out for him probably. But I'm not sure it's going to take that. That's all. So I don't know.
Okay, well, so if I'm Rick Hahn, I'm laughing at the funny joke you just made, and I'm asking for more. Todd, you need a third baseman, Dave. You need to make a deal for a third baseman. Let's be honest here. Devers isn't ready.
I'll just go get Jed Lowry then.
Much as I know you, well, hold on. Well, Jed Lowry's going to get hurt the second you trade for him. Let's be honest. He's going to
Fair
trip.
point.
He's going to trip on the dugout steps and be out for the rest of the season. Okay, I get. I know I'm not going to get Devers. I know I'm not getting Groome. You know what? I'm not even going to ask for Sam Travis. I'm going to say we're going to eat some salary. What would it take to pry Michael Chavis or Blake Swihart from you? I think that's where their ask starts.
I would agree.
I wonder if that deal needs to include a David Robertson, though. And granted, there's going to be more going back to the White Sox, but
yeah, I mean, I think the money thing is a big factor, and then that the White Sox, I just don't know if there's that big of a market, because if you look around the teams that are going to be buying at the deadline, I don't think any of them, other than the Red Sox, really have a big need at third base.
Yeah, I remember
Frazier's such a perfect fit for the Red Sox that it just, I don't know. It
and
seems
plus,
like they've
made deals with
ground.
they've made deals with the White Sox already too. So the two teams have
they have a
scouted
good
each other.
relationship. Like I think they'll be able to find a middle ground where it'll end up. That's why I mentioned like someone like Alchemy is where I'd suspect it would end up somewhere in the middle there. Maybe they like, I don't know, they like Bobby Dalbec or something a little more, someone in that range. I just don't see them having to give up that much unless they're like the White Sox are eating the entire salary and you're maybe in a bigger package, including Robertson or something like that.
What if the Red Sox activated Dalbec from the DL to trade him?
Maybe thinking outside the box there.
Of course, they could also just have made him a player to be named later. But
yeah.
I
mean, it's gonna be interesting because we'll see. We'll have a good idea of how the Red Sox valued the certain players in their org, depending on if the deal does get done, who's involved.
Right.
And I think that someone like Swihart's interesting. He's kind of stagnated in Pawtucket. I think he's back on the DL right now, I want to say.
Who?
And Swihart.
Yeah, he's on the DL right now. His ankle.
And he could be someone who just needs a change of scenery, because it seems like, for right or wrong, the Red Sox are pretty committed to the Christian Vasquez, Sandy Leon, all-glove, no-hit duo back behind the plate. And that's kind of what it's. I mean, both are under team control, I'm pretty sure. So they're just, and you're not going to carry three catchers. So I'm not sure Swihart has a place on this team, going forward in the future, especially given his struggles this year. And
well, it's been injury struggles this year, and I think the problem is that they need to make a decision this offseason with whether to bring Sandy Leon back, or, I mean, can you go into next season? Like, is Sandy Leon going to take a 1-year deal to come back, knowing that it's basically like we need another year to hedge on whether Blake Swihart's ready? Yeah,
but this is the thing. I mean, Swihart's what? Is he 24 now? He's 25. Like, he's going to be 26 to start next season. I don't think it's not a great situation what's going on right now.
Well, because he's been hurt all year.
I mean, but even when he's been playing, I've seen him a handful of times. He hasn't looked great. I mean, he's been really pressing at the plate, and he just doesn't look like the same player he did a couple of years ago, ever since they moved him to the outfield for that brief stretch. So I don't know. I think he could be someone who would be an interesting candidate as a change of scenery that another team would be interested on based on what, their past reports. If you want to go that route, versus compared to, let's say you wanted to go like the more present value route, then you're probably looking at, as you said, you'll ask about Chavis, you'll ask about Alchemy, you'll ask in that Mata, you're asking that range. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the package is built around. It's going to depend a lot upon how much is coming back, obviously. Like if it's just Frazier versus Frazier, I mean, Robertson obviously doubles the value coming back at the very
more
least.
Than that. I mean, you saw today with the Nationals.
I mean, the Nationals deal. Yeah, I mean, the Nationals got Ryan Doolittle, and Ryan Madsen. Sean Doolittle. What did I say, Ryan Doolittle?
Yeah.
I don't know who that is. Ryan Madsen. Okay, that's what it is. Ryan Madsen and Sean Doolittle. I was concentrating too much on making my UVA shutout. But in exchange for Blake Trinan, Jesus Luzardo, and the third baseman, who was it? What's the name? I don't know.
Noose. He was drafted last year. He was their second-round pick.
He was. Okay.
He seems kind of Bobby Dalbec-ish.
Okay. All right. That works.
That's basically solely on reading his baseball reference page in one scouting report. But
well, there you go. I mean, that works for me. But yeah, it just seems like If that's the going rate for, two relievers at least.
And they're both under team control for next year, too.
Oh, well, there you go.
Which changes things a little bit.
Well,
but Robertson's also under team control.
I was about to say he is. So, granted, making more money, but also probably a little bit better. Although do little shoves when he's healthy, which isn't rarely. But
yeah.
So that'll change things a lot too. Well, let's talk about though a very related discussion here. Something we've previewed that we're going to talk about. We don't like talking about it too early because, frankly, things change a lot over time in this discussion. But players who are Rule 5 eligible this coming off season, Ian. Frankly, there's a bit of a logjam coming up. We haven't done the math on how many spots are coming available and who they're going to keep and who they're not going to keep. We're not going to do that yet because it doesn't quite matter yet. And we'll explain why. The Red Sox have probably a dozen guys who it is worth discussing whether or not they will be kept in Rule 5. They won't all get kept in Rule 5.
I don't think it's a dozen anymore. I'm just looking at it now. It's really thinned out.
Well, it has thinned. Well, let's put it this way. A couple months ago, there were a dozen guys.
Yeah, there's not a dozen now.
Trey Ball, Gerson Batista, Jalen Beeks, Ty Buttrey, Jamie Callahan, Rusney Castillo, Jake Cosart. Don't worry, Ian. We'll talk. Rafael Devers, but that's the last we're even going to say his name because he's probably getting at it before the end of the season. Never mind, November.
Danny Mars. Chandler Shepard, and Nuri Tavares. That's it.
Jeremy Rivera.
They don't
get picked, but you talk about him. I don't think Hildemar Ukrainia's stuff is there, but maybe Teddy Stankiewicz. I don't know. I don't think they do, but I'm just saying the names. That's a lot of guys they need to think about. At this point, you think probably. Let me try and bring up the forms being wonky as hell right now. The list of guys that I had come up with myself were that obviously Devers is a lock, stone cold lead pipe lock to borrow from Mike and Mike, which I kind of immediately regret. So there's him. I have Devers as a lock. I have Jalen Beeks.
Buttrey's not a lock.
I had Ty Buttrey as a lock, and I had Jamie Callahan as a lock. I had Chandler Shepard as a probably. I had as in another year would be in probably as Trey Ball. Funny the difference 2 days can make. Possiblies Danny Mars, Nuri Tavares, Harrison Cooney. And unlikelies Jake Cosart, Dedgar Jimenez, Gerson Batista, Darwins, and Hernandez, who we've since found out probably doesn't qualify for the Rule 5 draft this year for the same reason that the Basabes did not last year, and that he was signed after the Dominican Summer League regular season ended. Unlikely Yancory Pimentel, Jeremy Rivera, Teddy Stankiewicz. Rusney Castillo, probably not. It's still a lot of guys. Keep in mind that Nick Longy was once on this list and got traded. I believe that if they make trades, look for players on this list to be at least the second player in a deal. Guys like Jamie Callahan, guys like Chandler Shepard, guys like potentially Jalen Beeks, Danny Mars, I could see getting moved. Nuri Tavares, who has already been picked in Rule 5 once and returned. It reminds me a lot of the year that the Red Sox traded basically a poo-poo platter of guys who were eligible for the Rule 5 draft for, was it Eric Bedard? They traded,
it was like Chase Chang.
Chee-Sin Chang. It was like a three-way deal. Chee-Sin Chang to the Mariners, and they traded Stephen Fife, Tim Fedorovich, and
Juan Rodriguez.
Really? No, that was I guess so.
Yep.
And Juan Rodriguez to the Dodgers.
Yep.
Juan Rodriguez was at the Dodgers? No kidding. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they traded all of those guys at the deadline, essentially because they weren't going to have room for all of them on the 40-man roster. Oh, that was Josh Fields came back too. Yeah, so it was Fedorovich, Fife, and Rodriguez to the Dodgers with Trayvon Robinson from Seattle. Wow, there's a name I haven't heard in a while. Seattle got only Chee-Sin Chang, and the Red Sox got Eric Bedard and Josh Fields. What a weird trade in hindsight.
Seattle got screwed out of that deal.
Wow. But Seattle only gave up
Bedard and Trayvon Robinson.
Trayvon Robinson. I don't know. What a weird trade. Anyway, it's just interesting to me just to see how this can affect deals like that. And so I keep an eye on those guys. And I should mention Ian because we just covered it and we're planning to anyway, but we did get an email on this very question. Oh no, we got a tweet on this question from Jonathan at jcullen71. Which potential Rule 5 picks could the Red Sox trade in the coming weeks? I would say all of them but Devers, frankly.
Yeah, and I think right now, if you told me the only two people who I think who are locks to get added are Beeks and Devers.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think Callahan probably does, but I think those are the only two no doubt locks.
Yeah, I mean Ty Buttrey just got probably the other thing worth mentioning. He was the counter move for Devers. He got sent back down to Portland, essentially because there are just too many pitchers in Pawtucket.
I mean, he's been pretty bad too.
He's been bad. Yeah, he's been bad, but it's just also
he hasn't been able to throw strikes. So
yeah, it was a numbers thing too.
In 9 innings or something.
Yeah, he here I can bring it up right now. But yeah, he had walked 10 guys in 14 2/3 innings in 9 appearances, striking out 14, which is great. But he had also allowed 20 hits. So he'd allowed 30 base runners in 14 2/3, which is too many. So send him back down to Portland. We'll get the train rolling again, hopefully.
He threw well today. I think he had like 2 scoreless innings or something.
Well, there you go. Get it back on track. Probably better for him in the long run, given that the Paw Sox have including Eduardo Rodriguez. Let's see, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 starters and 5 relievers on the roster. But the only reason it's that few is because Workman and Maddox have been called up in the past 2 days. To Boston. So, anywho, that's that. So keep an eye on all those Rule 5 guys is the moral of the story. Ian, given the amount of time, I think we will let's do very quick hits on Portland. You have 5 minutes, at which point I am cutting you off. You have free reign. Go. Do you want a 1 minute, 1 minute interval notices? Do you want a 2.5 and a 1 minute?
No, I mean, I don't even think it'll take 5 minutes.
Okay.
Because you should just read the news articles that are going to come out on all the relevant things over the next week.
There you go.
So, we'll have something on Trey Ball, Rafael Devers, Michael Chavis, Bobby Pointer, who's someone who people have been interested in because he's kind of sneakily put together a crazy good year, especially since he got to Portland. He's been even better with Portland than with Salem, which is surprising to me.
Yeah, well,
I'll that good.
Yeah, I'll read the line. It's 20 1/3 innings, 9 hits, 3 walks, 28 strikeouts.
I actually saw the outing where he got tagged for 3 runs too. Funnily enough.
Well, only one run is earned.
No, none were earned in that outing though. But he was 88 to 90, which is funny when you compare the stat line because he just doesn't throw hard at all. But he's got deception. He's got feel for a changeup. And then, as I kind of talked about in the piece, but with the bar for left-handed pitchers is so low, especially lefties who can get out guys from both sides of the plate, which if you look at Pointer, he's never had really platoon splits. So he's someone who is kind of interesting now. There's not a lot of upside, but is like a back-end Robbie Scott type. Could have a future with that role. At the plate, the other guys who are interesting were Chavis. Chavis I saw a doubleheader. He had played pretty well. He had some good swings. He looks healthy, which is nice. He was seeing the ball pretty well. Made a lot of hard contact. The bat speed is definitely there. It's just I still have some questions about the swing and miss. And his pitch recognition needs a little bit of work. He can hit a bad breaking ball. He crushed a hanging curveball for a double off the wall. But I want to see him, pick up a good breaking ball or at least stay back and drive it to right center or to left center. And the other thing is he does need to work on going the other way. It's a very pull-happy approach right now. Defensively, I saw Chavis play 1 game, and it was a mixed bag. He made a bad error on a routine ground ball that he just filleted it to the side instead of getting in front of it. And I noticed that his footwork is not very good at third base. He had a couple throws that the first baseman's bailed him out on where he didn't really set himself or he just tried to rely on his arm. And he's not very instinctual at third. There was one situation where there was a guy, it was first and second, and there were, I want to say, 2 outs in the inning. and he fielded a ground ball right next to the third base bag, where all he had to do was stick his foot out and touch it. But instead of doing that, he tried to show off the arm and make the throw across the diamond, and he bounced the throw. Thankfully, the first baseman bailed him out. But it's kind of one of those things where the third baseman, you need to know the situation there and that you can just step on the base for the out. And then with Devers, he looked like Rafael Devers. He walked a couple times, had a couple hits, went to both field, showed off, the ability to go other way. He's a good hitter. I mean, I really like Rafael Devers, as we kind of talked about earlier. So not a lot to add on him. And then the other two guys from the lineup I'll briefly mention. Chad De La Guerra is someone who's kind of a little bit interesting to me. He hit pretty well in Salem. He was 294, 368, 463, and was promoted along with Chavis. And he's actually hit better since he got to Portland, albeit in only like 60 at bats or something. But he had 3 hits in one of the games, and he showed he just was using all fields, like a line drive, doubles power. But the interesting thing to me is they have him playing shortstop primarily, which back when I saw him at Lowell, you told me that I would have never thought there was a chance because he wasn't very good at second base. And unfortunately, in the game I saw, he played second base, so I kind of saw him there. And I talked about his defense in the article, so if you want to get a better idea, you can check that out. And the other one is Danny Mars. He's just someone who he's just continued to hit, and it's not a lot of upside. It's a kind of a weird profile because he's very small, not height wise, but he's like rail thin. But he's just continuing to hit. I think he's over 300 for the year. He's at 309. There's not a lot of power and it's not a lot of speed in terms of base stealing ability, but he could be someone who's maybe like a bench outfielder eventually. So, yeah, that's about it from Portland. There wasn't a lot going on, to be honest.
4.5 minutes. Well played.
Thank you.
Well played, sir. I should just give you a minute next time so you get everything in 30 seconds. See how that goes. But, yeah. All right. Well, cool. Good. Make sure you check out news.soxprospects.com. We'll have those going up in the coming days.
Yep.
Last thing we need to get to is listener emails. Again, the email is podcast@soxprospects.com. Make sure you get those into us. We always like talking about what you want to hear about. Our next email comes from our patron, Lendl Martin. And the cat's readjusting. He asks, outside of Devers to Pawtucket, which hadn't happened yet at the time he emailed, but has now happened, obviously. Are there any notable promotions that could be coming? Maybe Josh Ockamy to Portland, provided he doesn't struggle in the second half like last year. Not really. And I do kind of want to point out on Ockamy, provided he doesn't struggle in the second half, is already happening. In July, he's hitting 200, granted with some pop. I mean, he's got a 444 slugging percentage. Granted, that's a 45 at bat sample. But in June, Ockamy hit 212 with no home runs, 2 doubles, no triples. Struck out 22 times and walked 20 times. So the on base percentage was 362, which is nice and healthy. But I have also gotten a report on him that's just. This is part of why we say you really can't read too much into walks in the minors. The kind of knock on him that this report was, is just he's very passive and just gets aggressive at the wrong times still.
I can see that.
The walks are more of a passivity thing than a knowing the strike zone thing. If you look, his looking strikeout percentage is 31.8%, which is way higher than it was last year. He struck out looking 7. That's in June. Of his 22 strikeouts, 7 were looking. On the year, he struck out looking in 23% of his strikeouts. He's already at 90 strikeouts in 86 games, and 21 of those are looking. 59 walks for the year. So, again, walks aren't all made the same, frankly. So. I would say that's already happening. There's no chance he's getting promoted to Portland during the season at all.
I wouldn't like maybe for like the last series of the season potentially, but I agree. Like it's not going to happen before then.
But what's the point? I can't see.
I think it's unlikely, but yeah.
Yeah. As far as what's in the offing, when we were talking about this earlier, Ian, you had an interesting thought on Dedgar Jimenez. Left-handed pitcher in Salem.
Yeah, I don't know. He just gets outs, and it's not pretty. The stuff isn't really good, But I mean, he's having a really good year. You know, he's got a 1.2 WHIP, 3 ERAs just over 3, allowed less than a hit per inning, and he's got about a strikeout an inning. And he's someone that it seems like, you know, is kind of starting to figure things out. And I don't think there's a lot of upside, but if they need someone who can eat innings and give you, 6 solid innings, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him at Portland at some point.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Someone on our forum classified his scouting report on the website as he's fat and isn't good at throwing baseballs, which I think was kind of unfair.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't agree with that. We're saying that he's got fringy stuff. It's fringe average to average stuff.
But if you can it
plays up.
Throw strikes, that works in the low minors.
He's got deception because it hides behind his 6'3", 230-pound lols
He's
body.
not 230.
No.
You add about 60 pounds to that, maybe.
No. I told the guy who saw him that's what he was listed at, and he started laughing.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. And I think, it's weird. It's in a weird place where I just don't see, there's not a lot of guys who have the combination of performance and ready for promotion.
Yeah, and the thing, too, is that there has to be room, right? So the point I made with you earlier was that, for example, Portland to Pawtucket promotions are tough because there needs to be room in Pawtucket, specifically with the pitchers. They don't have room for pitchers in Pawtucket right now. Every single guy who's pitching there is either on the 40-man, a prospect, or pitching well.
Well, similarly, like outfielders, like maybe someone like Danny Mars, you would think, but then you've got Rusney, Castillo, Bryce Brenson, Neri Tavares, and Steve Selsky, and all 4 of them are playing every day.
Yeah.
And you want Tavares playing every day. The org seems to like Selsky, so he needs to play every day. And Brents is killing the ball since he changed up his swing a little bit, or swing mechanics, and all of a sudden tapped into his power and is now up to, I think he won the home run derby at the All-Star game, and he's now up to 270 with 18 home runs after just a disastrous first, I want to say, 2 months. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it was really like a month and a half, if you look at his
April he hit 205, and May he hit 233.
Yeah, he started hitting near the end of May, and the thing is at that point he was a bench player. He wasn't even a starting outfielder on that team, which says a lot.
In June he hit 323 with a 404 on base and a 688 slugging with 10 home runs across 26 games. And the most encouraging thing for me was the strikeout percentage is down to 16%. And his walk rate is up to 11%. Whereas you compare last year in Pawtucket, this is just for June, his strikeout rate was 21%, his walk percentage was 2%.
Mm-hmm. And he would be a candidate for promotion if he were at any other level but Pawtucket.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, no one in
no
Greenville, really.
No.
I mean, the types of moves you might see is like Daniel Gonzalez from Greenville to Salem, but that will be because there's room or something. They're just
I
no
wouldn't
one's jumping
classify
off
that
the
as
page.
a promotion, really.
No,
so,
I mean, considering he's already pitched there once this year.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't expect a whole lot, frankly. No one really from Lowell. Maybe Brett Netzer goes up to Greenville, but I don't know. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. So we'll see. We'll see. At the very least, I don't see that happening. Good question. Thanks for the email, Lindell. But I don't see any other really interesting promotions happening. We got another email in. I wanted this to hit your ears for the first time when I read it to you live on the podcast. And so here goes. We got an email from Vinny. And Vinny, thank you for your email. I'm sure you're a very nice person, and I don't dislike you as a human being, but your email is kind of insane. He asks, should the league prohibit teams from not having their first-round draftees on the roster? So again, that's prohibit them from not having their first-round draftees on the roster. I see the slow development of prospects being teased endlessly about whether this is the year player X makes it on the team, hurts the game, and creates disillusion and indifference from fans concerning the draft. Like I said, thank you for caring enough to send an email, Vinny, and perhaps listening to the podcast. But as I mentioned, I think you're insane. Basically, he's saying, should the league make teams put their first-round draftees on, I assume, the Major League roster?
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I mean, it's not, but that's what? I move on. I don't.
Well, okay, let's talk about this briefly. very briefly. Players who are drafted from college and high school are not ready for the major leagues. That is why they are not in the majors.
And if they are, they make the major leagues quick.
Making teams put their first rounders in the major leagues would hurt their development.
Yeah, I don't understand. I'm confused by that question.
And to me, I think the reason people don't care about the draft as opposed to, say, the NBA or NFL drafts is because nobody knows who the heck these guys are, because no one follows college baseball, or at least compared to college football and basketball. There are far fewer fans of college baseball.
Well, it's also there's like 40 rounds.
There's 40 rounds.
There's 40 rounds.
And no one knows who the high school
guys are. And you can't trade picks.
And you can't trade picks.
Yeah, and you can't trade picks. So no one cares.
So, yeah, no one cares. No one's going to care.
That's not fair. That's not fair. No, people do care, but it's just a very niche market.
And the thing is, putting players in the major leagues immediately is going to probably decrease interest because all these guys are going to suck because they're not ready for the majors. So
that's not a good idea.
Thanks for the email, Vinny, but you're insane. Our final email comes from Steven. As we go in for you, Ian, he asks about Williams Jerez. He says he always followed him from his transition from hitter to pitcher. He has had 3 really bad outings this year, which have inflated his numbers, but he has had between 15 to 20 good ones. He keeps sliding down and now out of the rankings, despite making the Double-A All-Star game. Is his stuff regressing? First off, making the All-Star game
doesn't mean a lot.
Doesn't really mean much. Let me read you Williams Jerez's numbers on the year. 44 and a third innings, 39 strikeouts, 14 walks. Okay, not bad. 3.65 ERA, fine. But I mean his strikeouts peaked last year versus this year. They were worse in 2015. He's in his second full season at the level, and he had half a season there in 2015. So he's now spent 2 full years in Portland and can't break his way up to Pawtucket.
It's just this stuff hasn't really progressed. He's kind of been the same guy for the last few years. And, he had when he was converting originally, you could see, I mean, there was definitely, he was advanced for a position player converting to pitcher, but he's kind of stagnated at Portland. The stuff, it's like a straight fastball at like 94, 93, pretty hittable. The slider's not really showing that much potential. So, while the numbers are all right, it's not a great profile. And I don't know, when you look at, he's not dominating like someone who, if they're in their second year, you would hope they would be. I just don't see a lot of upside there. I mean, maybe he could be like a up and down guy, but it's just, he's kind of stagnated at the level. So it's not he's regressed. It's just, he's kind of the same guy and has been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who he was designated for assignment last year and cleared waivers. I mean, that kind of says it.
Yeah, right, I think, there. And that says everything. Yeah.
It really, he was an interesting guy in the offseason of 2015 to 16, but he's just not nearly as interesting anymore. And I also wanted to read that to kind of reiterate the point of, a guy sliding out of the rankings right now. Again, it's not necessarily them falling so much as guys jumping ahead of them. With him, I think it's a combination of both. So.
I agree.
Thanks for the email, Stephen. And I think that's going to wrap it up, Ian. Sorry for a bit of the disjointed podcast this week, guys. Blame Skype a little bit. Quick programming. Quick programming note. No podcast next week. Maybe we'll do something in an emergency basis if a trade goes down, but I'm not promising that. If it's a straightforward thing, if it's not something that's really crazy and out of the blue, that might not happen. We might just wait. I'm going to be away, unfortunately, but we will be back at least the following weekend. We're planning to do an episode because the weekend after that I am also busy. So
trade deadline preview.
Yeah, trade deadline preview, although knowing Dave Dombrowski, things will probably have happened already. I think someone was saying the last 2 years, but at this point he had already made a deal. So, yeah, trade could happen any day now. Maybe if a trade happens the next day or two, we'll hop on really quick to talk about it. But I think it's probably more likely we'll put something up on news.soxprospects.com. That's the news page. Head there for all your news, daily recaps, updates, Ian's scouting scratches, our twice weekly notes on what's happening, what's out there on the web, recapping everything else that happened. Yeah, like I said, daily recaps and a cup of coffee. maybe start trying to add a little bit to that soon too as well. So check out the news page. Check us out on Twitter. We'll be talking about anything that happens on there as well. I'm at SP Chris Hatfield. Ian is at Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. Ian, I think we should put a bow on this.
Yes, I agree. I gotta go eat food.
Excellent. Well, you go do that. Everyone, thank you for listening. We'll be back at you in a couple weeks.